First-person shooters have been around for a long time. Originally discovered amongst the ancient ruins of the Egyptians, they have now become a household name in the world of video games. Because of the rise in their popularity, this has led to a lot of different changes throughout the last 6,000 years. From a few high school students studying fluid dynamics, to large-scale corporations like Microsoft and Blizzard holding tournaments with $100,000 prize pools. How did they go from this to this? Hey, thanks for tuning in and welcome to this week's video. Remember to hit the like button and be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more content from Vantage Gaming. In 1973, during a NASA study program at the Ames Research Center in California, a group of high school students started working on the world's first first-person shooter called Maze War. It was designed by Steve Colley, who originally built the program as a way to visualize fluid dynamics. Presented in the first person, the player would be spawned into a geometric maze that they'd then have to navigate. Colley, along with two other students, later modified the game to incorporate a second player, as well as the ability to shoot one another. Maze War used a system called tile-based movement, where the player would only be able to move from square to square and turn in 90-degree increments. This program's code was eventually used to build a version that could run over ARPANET, which is an early networking protocol built by the United States Department of Defense. This allowed for Maze War to be played by up to 8 players simultaneously. Another game that utilized tile-based movement was Akalabeth World of Doom. Released in 1979, it was built by Richard Garriott, who named the game after The Downfallen, a book in the Silmarillion series by J.R.R. Tolkien about the rise and fall of the Dunedain. After being contracted by the California Pacific Computer Company, Garriott claimed to have sold over 30,000 copies. Fun fact, the original artwork of the game was drawn by Garriott's mom, and the first few copies were sold in Ziploc bags with photocopied instruction manuals. Many of these tile-based games were released during the next few years, the most notable of which was MIDI Maze, released for the Atari ST in 1987. Due to its network-based multiplayer, it quickly built a cult following and was later ported for the Game Boy and Super NES under the name Faceball 2000. It went on to be known as the first mainstream 3D multiplayer shooter. At this point, FPS games were mostly just a collection of geometric shapes, with basic flat colors projected onto objects. Until November 1991, when id Software released a game called Catacomb 3D, which is considered a landmark in first-person shooter graphics because of a technology called texture mapping. Without getting too technical, this was a way for developers to wrap images around an object, which allowed them to have much higher levels of detail on the 3D assets within the game. This, as well as the previous advances in 3D technology, are an essential part of what made video games appealing to a wide audience, and helped take first-person shooters to the next level. With games like Wolfenstein 3D, Spear of Destiny, and Bungie's Pathways into Darkness, the FPS genre was gaining more and more popularity. In 1993, the release of Doom marked a defining moment in gaming history. To this day, it is considered to be the most important shooter ever made. Not just for FPS games, but for video games in general. There's a ton of information about this game and its influence on the industry, so I'll be making a video just dedicated to that, but for now, just know that Doom was essentially the first popular game that didn't rely on inventing a new technology in order to sell. It was simply a fun game to play, and because of that, developers started building games that were more focused on the user experience as opposed to graphical innovation. The limitation for FPS games at the time was that they exclusively used sprites for their in-game assets. Once computers were able to render complex 3D environments and its inhabitants at the same time, this allowed for games to utilize 3D polygons instead of sprites. In 1996, id Software released the long-awaited game Quake, which was a game catered towards online gaming and featured multiple match types still found in first-person shooters today. Being the inspiration behind many LAN events such as QuakeCon and Red Annihilation, it holds an important place in gaming history as the forerunner of competitive first-person shooters. The next title is one that I'm sure most of you will know. Up until this point, most of these games have been released for Mac and PC. This one, however, was released for the N64. Released in 1997, this game is perhaps the most well-known FPS on our list. Based on the 17th film in the James Bond series, it was one of the first games to utilize split-screen multiplayer. Known for its atmospheric single-player, well-designed multiplayer maps, and the introduction of a ton of new gameplay elements, GoldenEye went on to become the best-selling game on the N64 in the United States. In the year 2001, Microsoft released the original Xbox, and with it, Halo Combat Evolved. Halo was the start of something special. Not only did it help bring popularity back to the first-person shooter genre on console, but went on to become one of the most popular game series of all time. Followed by Halo 2 and the introduction of Xbox Live, more and more companies started building games geared towards online multiplayer. With gaming leagues like MLG, DreamHack, and ESL, competitive FPS games became increasingly more popular. This helped pave the way for more modern titles such as Overwatch and Call of Duty. And now, in year 2020, the first-person shooter is the most prominent style of game in the United States. I only touched on a fraction of the turning points in FPS history, and honestly, you could write an entire novel with the amount of information on the topic, but this video should give you an outline on how FPS games developed throughout the years. If you haven't already, then make sure to hit that like button. And if you've enjoyed this video, then share it with your friends, if you have them, or share it with your mom if that's where your life's at. Also, make sure to follow our social media links on our channel page so that you can become part of the community. Thanks for watching.